lame duck lawmaking and lame duck pardons. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. Just a few days left in the current lame duck legislative session at the Ohio State House. Lawmakers expect long nights next week. The flurry of legislation includes a so-called parents' rights bill that requires parental notification when teachers intend to address topics of sexuality, and it would require public schools allow students to leave for religious instruction. Another bill would give lawmakers a raise, and another bill would extend fracking leases in state parks, and that's just a sample of the many bills and amendments under consideration this session. Joe Ingles, given the strife between the House and the Senate this entire legislative session, is this lame duck portion of the session any different than years past?
I wouldn't say that it's different. I would say it's complicated because what we have right now is the legislation is added to so quickly, and you have situations, we've always had situations where lawmakers haven't had time to read what's been added to but it's gotten worse. And it also, knowing where the lines are and whose faction you're in is playing into how people want to digest it.
Is this any way to make laws, Terry?
Well, remember, Mike, this is Christmas time. Yes. So coming up with Christmas tree bills where all kind of things are tacked on, it's kind of, quote, 'tis the season. But one State House person did joke to me today, he said, lame duck, is that a tasty dinner or something else? It's not a tasty dinner, but we'll see next week what they do productive. And by the way, it isn't just the pay raise for lawmakers, it's for a lot of county officials and judges. And with term limits, there's a lot of state reps and state senators who might see themselves someday as a county commissioner or a judge or something else. So they're wanting to be, again, it's 'tis the season, Christmas, they want to be generous.
These are modest cost of living pay raises. They're not getting 10, 20% pay raises. So, Brian, it seems like that's something that we could have considered before Election Day. No?
Well, it would if you want to do it during the light of day. But the problem with lame duck is that you're doing it at a time where you think people aren't paying attention and you're trying to fly it through. And honestly, if somebody didn't write about it, they would have just been totally happy to get this to go through. This is why a lot of states in their legislators have what they call part-time legislators. They're there to do the budget. They convene for about 3 or 4 months. They're out, and the only person that can call them back is the governor for a special session. It protects taxpayers.
But some would say that in order to justify higher salaries, they want to be a full-time legislature. So there's a conflict of interest. Do you want them working a little bit or a lot, paying themselves more or less?
I think with lawmakers, you've got to remember the average lawmaker makes over $71,000 a year. The average Ohioan does not make over $71,000 a year. And the pay increases that are being proposed in this bill are much more generous than normal everyday Ohioans get. I mean, 5% the first year, 5% the second year, and then there's a built-in formula to make sure that you keep up with the cost of living. I think if you went out on the street and talked to ordinary Ohioans, you would find that many people who are working for less than the lawmakers, and they're not getting those costs of living raises.
Coming from labor, man, they must have good negotiators, but they're negotiating with themselves. So.
Let's get to the parental rights bill. It's critics call it a don't say gay bill. What it would require is teachers, if you're going to talk about issues of sexuality, you have to let parents know. Terry, isn't that just going to stifle education? If somebody raises their hand in a classroom and says, they ask about transgender rights or issues, and does the teacher have to say, time out, I got to let the parents know, we're going to talk about this now?
Well, there's a whole series of questions on what should parents know or not know, what should they be aware of, and of course, because of the COVID shutdown, a lot of parents watched on Zoom what was going on in the classroom, and good or bad, that's raised some questions. But there are a lot of areas, like in terms of what school officials, my wife is a longtime school nurse, there already are a lot of requirements of things where parents have to be notified. There's some areas that haven't been addressed, and that's part of the legislative process, debating what's good or bad, what should be shared, what shouldn't be shared.
Brian, it seems like a lot of regulation.
It is a lot of regulation. It's ridiculous. I mean, first of all, you're telling me a parent who has a child who is trans or has some of these issues that they don't know. If they don't know, they're not being very good parents, first of all. Secondly, because they're not paying attention. Secondly, maybe they don't know or they don't want to know because they're trying to make the child deny what they are, which can be a very harmful thing. We've learned from psychological things. And then here's the irony of this whole thing. This is the same legislature that told parents of transgender people, you can't make the decision about where your kid goes to the bathroom. We're going to do that. You can't make the decision about how to treat your trans child. We're going to do that as a legislature. So first they say, we don't want you to make a decision because you know about it. And now they're saying to schools, tell the parents.
And this is a Christmas tree bill, Joe, because the parents' rights bill was strictly about this, and then they tacked on ordering school districts to allow students to leave for religious instruction during, recess or a study hall or something like that.
Or lunch or whatever. The religious instruction bill, when LifeWise is like the organization statewide that most people can relate to. This is kind of the LifeWise bill, and it would basically tell school districts you have to have a policy on release for religious instruction. But one thing that the lawmakers are missing here, and I think needs to be really thought about, is where are kids learning a lot of things. It's not that some teacher's sitting down telling them a lot of things. A lot of things that kids learn, and it's no different than when we were kids. Kids learn things from other kids. And it happens in the classroom. It happens on the ball field. It happens
on the school bus.
The bus,
So bus drivers
anywhere.
have to notify parents if they're talking about
Yeah.
weird stuff on the.
I mean, there's all kinds of things.
And people forget the schools might only have the kids for 5.5 hours a day for maybe 180 half the days. So kids are learning a lot of ways, and there are questions. I know one of my grandsons likes doing YouTube, and you can find all kind of things, good and bad, mostly good and funny.
The real question is this the purpose of a legislature? I mean, it is because it polls well to pick on these groups and pick on these issues.
It's a culture war. That's what it is.
Brian, a lot of times Democrats are for regulation, but in this case they're against regulation. So there's a legitimate debate.
The flip side of that is you're saying now you're for regulation.
I didn't say that. I just said
Sure
there's a
sounded
debate
like
of
it.
how much do you
Sure
regulate,
sounded
how
like
much do you not regulate. It's an
All right.
interesting dichotomy.
Another American lame duck tradition is the presidential pardon. Presidents of both parties do it. On their way out of the White House, they pardon criminals or commute sentences. President Biden pardoned his son Hunter, and this week pardoned 39 additional people and commuted the sentences of nearly 1,500 others. It was the largest single-day presidential clemency action in history. Among those granted clemency was former Cuyahoga County Commissioner Jimmy DeMora. A jury convicted him of corruption charges in 2012. He served 11 years in prison before being released to home confinement because of COVID. Biden's commutation does not erase the conviction, but means DeMora no longer has to serve the rest of his sentence. Brian Rothenberg, before the Larry Householder scandal, this was the biggie in Ohio, the Jimmy DeMora.
Yeah, but
should he get leniency is my question.
Presidents have been doing this. The president Trump, by the way, did this for the mayor of Detroit and the former governor of Illinois, who both were in jail. In this instance, they're not actually in jail. In this instance, the list of 1,000 people were people that were nonviolent offenders that were in their homes, but under home confinement, and he released them. It's just part of the right of the president who's retiring, and Republicans have done it, just like Jared Kushner's father. It just is part of the.
If I can quote the normally fairly liberal and Democrat Cleveland Plain Dealer, they made strong points today that Jimmy DeMora has never been contrite for all the stealing and corruption that he was involved in. I mean, over 60 people were tried. This was a huge, massive corruption scheme. And the guy's out. And what kind of a message does it send to people in the future?
The same message that Trump sent to Kilpatrick
It's
in
okay to
Detroit,
steal, you can get
and
a pardon and get
Blagojevich
off.
in Illinois, and all these folks.
That's the question. I mean, these people who are, in most cases, some folks were given sentences that were extremely long, and you could understand why they might commute those. But, Joe, the prosecutors and police brought cases against these people. They either pled guilty or a jury, presumably, worked hard to convict them. And then with just one stroke of the pen or type of the keyboard, it's over. It never happened.
Well, everything's relative anymore. Look at politics. Everything is relative. When your guy does it, it's bad. When my guy does it, it's okay. That's the way it is. And so you look at some of the people who were pardoned, and I guarantee you can find people on the other side of the aisle who did something that was comparable, and they got pardoned or they didn't get prosecuted or something. There's always a way to justify this. It's a permission structure basically for people to say, okay, well, you know, they did it, so I can do it too.
Terry, Governor DeWine has the Expedited Pardon Project. He this week noted he's pardoned nearly 200 people, but they have to be nonviolent, I believe. They also have to prove they have been rehabilitated, that they have stayed out of trouble, and that they're contributing to society. So he's come around. I mean, he's a former prosecutor, and he's seeing pardons as a good thing.
Well, I think his process is a lot better than just taking care of your son or the Democrat boss in Cleveland who's never
Jared
apologized.
Kushner's father, who you then make an ambassador. I mean, why not?
Yeah, I mean, this is a truly bipartisan effort. But pardons, I think people are looking at pardons a little differently now because they see the unfair sentences perhaps imposed on drug offenses over the past 20 years.
Well, there's clearly been some problems. Everything's not perfect, but one of the questions coming up is whether Biden's, in my view, excessive use of the pardon makes it easier for people to look the other way in whatever Trump does, because now that people are kind of conditioned to pardons.
So you were opposed to what he did?
I'm just saying
You
that
were opposed to all those
when
people?
Biden does what he
Scooter
does, it
Libby,
could
all
make it
those
easy.
people that
It
he-
could
yeah,
make
I'm
it
just
easier.
going to say that what they're doing is absolutely proving what I just said about it all being relative.
Well, we'll see if the January 6th folks get pardoned. That'll be what we're going to watch after the first of the year. Anyway, Ohio's recreational marijuana law is about a year old. Voters approved it last November. Sales began this past summer. So far, the industry has generated nearly $200 million in sales. State lawmakers are considering some changes to the law, as they're able to do because it was a voter-approved statute. Among the things under consideration, increasing the tax rate for cannabis sales, limiting potency, and limiting the number of plants that people can grow at home. Lawmakers also want to increase regulations on hemp products like Delta 8. Joe Ingles, Matt Huffman, the incoming House Speaker, now Senate President, has never liked this law, the recreational marijuana law.
Right.
So he wants to put restrictions on it. Will he go further as House Speaker? Will he try to go further?
I think he'll try. I know he's not a big fan of the home grow, but the thing is, here's the problem with the whole issue is that a lot of the rural communities, if you go out there, they like the home grow. They like some of these other parts of the law, and they want it to stay in place. When you start looking at this revenue stream and where it's going, I mean, lawmakers have different ideas about where they want those taxes to go. And I think we're going to see them discussing that. I think we're going to see them looking at these various issues in the law and say, oh, I want to do this or that. But for every piece that they move, there's going to be another piece that gets moved. And it's going to pose a hardship to try to get the sweet spot.
So there's no chance, Terry, they would rescind the law completely based on the margin of the victory last year and also the money that's coming in.
Well, the money is big, but out of a $90 billion state budget, it's relatively small, and it's so targeted in how it's spent out. But the reality is when the people pushed this issue, when it got passed, they said that marijuana should be regulated like alcohol. Well, alcohol is very carefully regulated. The taxes are much higher.
I don't think people count how many beer cans you have in your house. That's ridiculous.
But where you can sell it, how you can sell it, and then like on this Delta 8, there's legitimate questions. If it's at the counter, packaged like Lifesavers, is that maybe overstepping and pushing things too much? So clearly, they ran a campaign saying, we know we're going to be regulated, but I think the regulations are going to be tightened.
But the
taxes
regulators
are going
aren't
to be
doing
increased.
it. Now we have a legislature that's doing it. And let me point out to you that if the less plants you can grow at home, the more you're going to have to go buy it and pay the tax.
Now, here's my question. I got coupons
Oh, wow.
from Michigan. This came in the mail. I don't know how I got on their mailing list, but it came in the mail from the Michigan, in Monroe, Michigan, just over the border. There's all kinds of buy one, get one free, high supply, $55 an ounce. I mean, that's a problem. If they keep raising the taxes and they don't offer Ohio can't offer coupons, I don't believe, with the law, will they lose business to other states?
Well, maybe the legislature will start regulating that. I mean, it has gotten to the point where your personal life is important to every legislature here. They want to tell you, what you can buy, how many plants you can grow, how this is going to work. And at some point, you got to say that isn't your role.
And I want to point out that Delta 8 and marijuana are technically two different things. They're regulated differently, they're treated differently. So Ohio's marijuana law is not over Delta 8. That's a different thing
But they want to
altogether.
restrict it to keep it away from
Correct,
kids.
correct.
Because you can buy
Right.
that in the gas station now.
You can.
Yeah,
You
and
can.
it has a hemp-like, marijuana-like effect on folks.
Right.
But again, they said they wanted to be regulated like alcohol. Be careful what you wish for.
Okay, just pointing out, nobody count. They might count your plants, but no one's counting your hurricanes.
It's been 4 months. You know, Mike DeWine was worried about kids standing in line at the Nutcracker were going to smell marijuana. The Nutcracker is playing. Have we heard any incidents of marijuana wafting over the Capitol Square by the Ohio Theater? No?
I was at the Ohio State game. At one point, I did catch a little sniff of something, so it didn't quite sound like honeysuckle.
Anyway, still has time, and technically, Senator J.D. Vance has not resigned yet, but the deadline for picking Ohio's next U.S. Senator approaches. DeWine must choose a successor to Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. DeWine told reporters this week the list of applicants is long. He has talked to a few candidates, but he did not tip his hand as to who he might pick. The names being tossed around: Congressman Mike Carey, State Senator Matt Dolan, Secretary of State Frank LaRose, former State GOP Chair Jane Timken, Terry Casey. It's a long list of inquiries and applicants, but Mike DeWine's list is pretty short, is it not?
Well, but he holds his cards very close because he recognizes it's nearly 6 weeks between now and January 20th. Things can happen, and I also toss out on the table, Herb Asher hinted at it a little bit in last week's program. There's a guy named Ramaswamy who might have some interest maybe in running for governor, maybe senator, but that might affect how a lieutenant governor looks at what he does or runs for. So there's still a lot of moving parts, but again, Mike DeWine, he doesn't mind having people talking to him about it and asking him about it. He kind of likes the mystery, and we got a lot of time, and again, it gives something good for us to talk about on this show.
He did say this week at there was an event with reporters, and he said basically whoever he picks, he wants them to be able to run and win a primary when they need to do that in a couple of years. So I think that's playing in the back of his mind too. I think he's going to pick someone who has the ability to get cash, to be able to be competitive.
So that means he wants someone who Donald
Who
Trump
hasn't
will
lost the
endorse.
primary. Yeah, and that he can endorse. But he's also, he's in the traditional side of the Republican Party, which is more Chamber of Commerce, Republican Party. He's got to get an agreement with Trump on this. You got to get a candidate that can both raise money, not just this cycle, but they're going to have to run again the next cycle, and that's going to be awfully expensive. So it's tough. The other thing is you would hold your cards close to your vest because the minute you announce who this candidate is, just like congressional appointments, they're up for scrutiny, and you're giving them more time to be scrutinized.
I mean, there is that speculation that if Vivek Ramaswamy comes back from his cost-cutting mission in Washington and runs here, he would get the Trump endorsement, presumably. He worked for Donald Trump. And then John Huston he'd have a tough primary. John Huston wants to be governor, but he might take the safer route.
There's an attorney general named Dave Yost that's definitely running for governor, and there's some other people like Jim Renacci who've run in the past, and then there's other people too. So, but again, there's lots of candidates, lots of interests out there, and on the Democrat side, we still don't know what Sherrod Brown or Tim Ryan might do, both of whom can raise money nationally in buckets of millions of dollars.
Is there a name we're not even talking about that might surprise us at the end, or will be among these
I think
folks?
there always are, and I think you do have other candidates out there, including some female candidates that might want to get involved on the Democratic side. Minority Leader Russo, you've got the former health director, Amy Acton. You've got some others. And you don't know how these play out. I mean, I remember when Gretchen Whitmer was running, everybody was thinking, she has no prayer when it comes to the race, and it turned out pretty well.
Are there any Republican names we're not
Well,
thinking
and
of
here's
yet?
another twist. Let's say he appoints Husted or Frank LaRose or Robert Sprague, the state treasurer, then that opens up that position for somebody to be appointed. So it's almost, can have a full hour show speculating about all the names and people and machinations.
It's like a chessboard, just moving the pieces around. If you knock one person off, it has ramifications. Our last topic: politics has always been a part of the court system. Judges and justices are either elected by voters or they're appointed by politicians. But it seems like the wall between politics and the courts has become thinner in recent years. Take the latest ruling from the Ohio Supreme Court refusing to reconsider its infamous chicken wing decision. The court has upheld its decision that a man injured by a bone in what the restaurant called a boneless chicken wing could not sue. The court ruled boneless wings are a cooking style and not a guarantee of no bones. In the latest dissent of the decision, Democrats on the court decried conservatives' judicial activism. Justice Melody Stewart called the ruling asinine. Terry, I don't think that's a Latin word that you often see in legal briefs, but is politics getting too involved in the courts these days?
Well, politics creeps into the courts. We have a federal judge here who a year and a half ago said he was going to retire, but then when the president wouldn't appoint the person he wanted, he decided, I'm not going to retire, and Donald Trump wins. So judges wear black robes, and they're mostly focused on the law, but unfortunately, the law books don't define boneless chicken. And also, if you've been around, you kind of know things might be boneless, but you still need to be careful what you're doing.
Come on. Come on. I mean, yes, our Ohio Supreme Court has gone way overboard in recent years, whether it's, trying to win over the redistricting issue, whether it's the education decision and just it's unconstitutional, but you can't fix it. But chicken wings, really, boneless chicken wings. If I'm eating a boneless wing that's on there, I assume there's no bones. It's really simple.
The concern is, Joe, that when you look at that case and you look at the redistricting ballot language, which was loaded and biased, it might have been technically accurate, but it definitely was designed to confuse voters and have the other side win. Does that erode trust in the courts?
No, it doesn't. It should. It should, and for some people it may, for some people who are tuned in. But let's face it, the majority of the voters are tuned out. When it comes to the court, they don't know who sits on the court. They don't know what their party affiliation is, and they're certainly not watching everything like we are. So I think, eroding widespread public trust, it does not, but it does for those who are paying attention, of course.
Terry, will you ever see a justice who wins a seat as a conservative and then kind of aligns with Democrats? I'm thinking of former Supreme Court Justice Paul Pfeiffer, who was a Republican, granted a moderate one, but then always ruled with Democrats.
There's some interesting twists if you look like Pat Fisher from Cincinnati is not always as rigid and looks at different things. But again, it depends on what the issue is. And also people forget the Ohio Supreme Court gets about 1,700 cases a year. So sometimes we look at 2 or 3 or 4 more political cases, but most of them are pretty focused on the law and what the previous court decisions say, what does the legislature say. So again, out of 1,700 cases, you got to put it in perspective.
They might focus on the law, but common sense is out the door.
Well, that's the common sense is the job of the legislature to figure out what's smart. They're supposed to look at what's the Constitution say, what's the law.
I'd expect my justices to have common sense too.
So, but my next question is, should we elect members of the Ohio Supreme Court, Brian?
I really think that there are other ways that people elect judges in other states, including appointing them and then having them run once to be retained. And I think we should really look at this. I don't think those states are that partisan like we are right now.
Longtime Ohio Chief Justice Republican Tom Moyer wanted to move to a different system where the voters didn't have a say. It went to the voters in Democracy in Action, and they put thumbs down and said no. They like to vote on things, and that's kind of been the history in Ohio and a lot of parts of America. People don't want to, they might not know who the county engineer is, but they don't want to lose their right to vote.
When you see what happens with, Mitch McConnell holding that Supreme Court seat open for 9 months to wait for the election of Donald Trump to come in. So appointments they're not apolitical either.
That's not, one of the major changes that we've seen is putting the R's and the D's next to the candidates' names, because it used to be that before we had R's and D's next to the name, about 4 years ago, I guess 3 years ago, people would go in and you wouldn't see a massive landslide one way or another. But
Or
what we saw,
like Justice O'Neill that one time when he won without spending any money.
but it's different now.
Yeah, the good Irish name. Let's get to our final off-the-record, Brian. Final comments. Brian Rothenberg, you're up first.
I was at a meeting of the Ohio History Center and the Poindexter Village group, and they are working very hard at turning the Poindexter Village African American Museum and getting it open here in Columbus in a few years. It should be 2 or 3 years. It was the first public housing in the entire country dedicated by the Roosevelts, actually.
Interesting. Terry.
In Columbus, it hadn't gotten as much attention, but there's a team up in Cleveland. They haven't had a good season named the Browns. Well, the billionaire owner wants $1.2 billion from the taxpayers, and the governor this week has kind of jumped in the middle, trying to bring the mayor, the county executive, the owner to figure out where the future is of the Browns, and do they need, like L.A. and Jerry Jones has down in the Dallas area, a luxury stadium, or are we going to suffer in Ohio with just stadiums in cold weather?
Bengals will be next. Joe.
I just want to share a quick interchange I heard this week. The governor and Lieutenant Governor Husted were all together, and I asked about the bill that's out there to prevent someone from planting a flag in the 50-yard line at Ohio Stadium or any other stadium, basically. And, the governor kind of laughed about it, and Lieutenant Governor Husted said, well, there's one way to deal with this: win. So.
That is true. And fun fact, you really cannot plant a flag in Ohio Stadium. It's artificial turf and there's concrete there. You just can't do it. Anyway, that is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. You can watch us anytime at our website, wosu.org/COTR. We're also on YouTube and the PBS video app. For our crew and our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.